My name is Mia Carter. I'm 30 years old, and 1 month ago, my own father stood up at my younger sister's wedding and erased me in front of 150 people. I was standing in the back of the ballroom, behind the videographer's tripod, doing what I always do at family events, staying out of the way and pretending that didn't hurt. When my father picked up the microphone for his speech, I had this ridiculous hope that maybe, just this once, he'd remember he had 2 daughters. Out of habit, I flipped my phone to the voice memo app and hit record. That reflex, more than anything, is the reason you're hearing this story now. He tapped the glass with his fork. "To my daughter," he said, and my heart actually lifted for a second. Then he laughed. "I should say, my only daughter. This amazing woman up here is the pride of my life. That thing standing in the back?" He gestured vaguely toward me as hundreds of heads turned. "That was just a mistake I made 30 years ago. Honestly, we should have given her up for adoption when we had the chance." The ballroom erupted. Some people laughed because they thought it was a joke, some because everyone else did. A few looked away, embarrassed. No one stopped him. No one told him to sit down. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I looked my father straight in the eyes, then slowly swept my gaze across the faces that had just watched my public execution and decided it was entertainment. Then I turned, walked out of the ballroom, through the lobby, and pushed through the revolving doors into cold, wind-whipped rain. On the sidewalk, water soaking through my dress, my phone still recording in my hand, I made myself a promise. This would be the last time they laughed at me without consequences. That night, I made 3 phone calls and sent 1 email that changed everything. 2 months later, my phone would light up with 68 missed calls and messages from the very same people who laughed, all screaming the same question: "What did you do to us?" Before I tell you what I did, how those 3 calls and 1 email turned my father's joke into his worst nightmare, tell me this. What time is it where you are right now, and where are you watching from? I want to see just how far the truth about my mistake of a life can travel. The morning after the wedding, I woke up on my couch in Boston still wearing the ruined dress, mascara crusted at the edges of my eyes, my phone on my chest. The first thing I did was press play on the recording. Hearing my father's voice through my earbuds, without the clinking glasses and polite laughter to blur it, was like being slapped a second time. I listened all the way through, right up to the moment where the ballroom roared and my heels clicked across the marble floor as I walked out. Then I hit save, renamed the file Evidence Wedding Speech, and backed it up to the encrypted cloud storage I use for work. I'm a cybersecurity consultant for hospitals. Backing up sensitive data is second nature. Yesterday, it was patient files and ransomware logs. Today, it was my father's voice calling me a mistake. I'd told myself 1,000 stories to survive the last 30 years. He's old school. That's just his humor. You're overreacting. But listening back, there was no way to soften it. He meant every word. And if he was willing to say that into a microphone in public, what else was he willing to do when nobody was recording? The first call I made that night, standing under that rain, had been to the only adult in my childhood who ever seemed quietly horrified by the way I was treated: my dad's younger brother. To me, he'd always been Uncle Steve. To the rest of the world, he was Stephen Harris, former co-founder of my father's company before he'd retired under mysterious circumstances 10 years ago. When he picked up, his voice was sleepy and worried. "Mia, are you okay? I saw the live stream cut out, but..." "Did you hear what he said?" My voice didn't shake. It came out cold. "Did you hear the speech?" There was a pause, then a slow exhale. "Your cousin sent me the clip," he said quietly. "I've watched it 3 times. Your father's lost his damn mind." "No," I said. "He's just finally saying out loud what he's always thought. I recorded it too. I'm done pretending this is just his sense of humor. I want to know what he's hiding, I want to know why he's always treated me like a problem he regrets instead of a daughter. Another pause, longer this time. Mia, this isn't just about hurt feelings, he said. If you start pulling at threads around Richard Carter, you won't just find mean jokes. You'll find things you can't unsee. Then help me see them, I said. I'm not a kid anymore. You were pushed out of Carter Municipal Systems. I know that wasn't as clean as he made it sound. You know where the bodies are buried. You really want to do this? He asked. Because once you start, there's no going back to Sunday dinners and fake smiles. I thought of the ballroom laughter. We both know I was never really invited to Sunday dinner, I said. Meet me tomorrow. Tell me the truth. He sighed, and in that sigh I heard 10 years of swallowed resentment. Fine. Noon. The diner in Quincy. Don't text this address to anyone, and Mia, don't bring that phone your father pays for. After I hung up with him, I dialed the second number, my college roommate, now one of the sharpest financial crime attorneys in the state, Lauren Brooks. We hadn't talked in months, but when she heard my voice, she immediately knew something was wrong. What happened? She asked. I sent her the audio file right there on the sidewalk, watching the upload bar crawl across the screen as rainwater slid down my wrist. When it finished, I said, Listen. Then tell me what I can do with this. The third call was to my own work phone, in other words, to myself. I left a detailed voicemail documenting exactly what had happened with dates, times, and the fact that I'd captured a recording. Then I converted that voicemail into a transcript and stored it in a secure folder along with the speech. It wasn't just my heart talking anymore. It was evidence. The email? That was to a generic, boring-looking address, integritymassprocurement.gov, the anonymous tip line for the state procurement office. I didn't accuse my father of anything. Not yet. I simply asked what a citizen should do if they believed a major city contractor was cooking books and retaliating against family members who knew too much. I hit send at 2:17 a.m., my fingers still trembling, and watched the tiny paper plane icon disappear. The next day, at the diner, Uncle Steve slid into the booth across from me, eyes red, hands wrapped around his coffee like he needed it to keep from shaking. For the first time in my life, he looked scared of my father. You really want to know why he treats you like that? He asked without preamble. Because you're the one thing he can't control. You chose cybersecurity instead of joining his empire. You refused to sign his standard family agreement when you graduated. And he's been moving money and contracts into your sister's name for years to punish you for that. He pulled a folded packet of old emails and board minutes from his jacket. He cut me out because I told him what he was doing was illegal. Fraud. Kickbacks on public works projects. False safety reports. All of it would blow up if someone with your skills and my receipts went digging. I stared at the papers, everything in me going very, very still. So let's dig, I said. If he insists I'm a mistake, I'm going to be the kind of mistake that ruins his perfect little world. If you were in my place, humiliated on camera by your own father, then handed the first proof that he might be a criminal, would you walk away to protect family, or would you start pulling on every thread you could find? Lauren didn't waste time. By the afternoon after the diner meeting, we were sitting in a cramped conference room at her firm, the kind with no windows and a humming fluorescent light that made everything feel more serious. I'd already scanned Uncle Steve's documents and sent them to her through a secure portal. She'd read them twice before I even arrived. Okay, she said, tapping the stack with a pen. Your father, Richard Carter, runs Carter Municipal Systems. They've had public contracts with the city for 15 years, traffic lights, smart intersections, parking systems. These minutes show he pushed his own brother out right before the company landed their biggest deal. This, she held up a photocopied email, is a threat. Sign this separation agreement and keep your mouth shut about billing practices, or you'll never work in this town again." "He wasn't kidding," Uncle Steve muttered. "I've been blacklisted from city contracts ever since." My stomach twisted. I'd grown up hearing my father talk about providing for the family, all those late nights, saving the city money. Now those stories tasted like ash. Lauren turned to me. "You work in cybersecurity for hospitals," she said. "You understand logs, metadata, network traffic. If your uncle's right, and your father is double billing or falsifying safety reports, there will be digital footprints everywhere, on email servers, in PDF drafts, in version histories." She leaned forward. "But we do this by the book. No illegal hacking. We use what you can get legitimately through family, public records, and what your uncle already has. Understood?" I nodded. "Understood?" I lied, just a little. "We started with what was public." I spent nights after work combing through city procurement databases, downloading every contract Carter Municipal Systems had won in the last decade. I cross-referenced project timelines with news stories about mysterious delays, unexplained outages, and, this one made my blood run cold, a pedestrian death at an intersection where the new smart lights had malfunctioned. At the same time, Uncle Steve requested his own personnel file and board correspondence from the years before he was pushed out, citing whistleblower protections. Some of it came back heavily redacted, but Laura knew exactly which black bars meant someone was hiding something they shouldn't. At her urging, I filed a formal request under the state's public records law for all safety inspections involving Carter Municipal Systems. Weeks passed. My days were filled with hospital security audits and employee phishing trainings, my nights with spreadsheets and PDFs, highlighter marks littering my kitchen table. The more I dug, the more a pattern emerged. Change orders signed on Fridays at 4:55 p.m., doubling the cost of projects without clear justification. Invoices for consulting services paid to shell companies with no websites, all registered to a P.O. box near my father's office. Repeated notes from city engineers about pressure from vendor to sign off quickly. Every time I connected a dot, I heard his voice again. "That thing in the back? Just a mistake." One afternoon, I opened a spreadsheet showing the distribution of company shares. That's when his favoritism became more than emotional, it became financial. 5 years ago, my sister Hannah had been gifted a 25% stake in Carter Municipal Systems in recognition of her contributions to marketing and strategy. My name didn't appear anywhere. There was, however, a familiar signature on a line labeled "Waiver of Future Claims to Family Assets." Mine. Date of the week I graduated college. I remembered the document now. He'd called it a standard form to simplify estate planning and shoved it in front of me at a noisy graduation dinner. I'd signed without reading, too overwhelmed and eager to avoid a fight. My hands clenched around the printout until the paper creased. That night, I sent Lauren everything. "He manipulated you into signing away your rights so he could funnel assets to your sister," she said over the phone. "It's disgusting, but it may also be leverage, especially if we can show a pattern of coercion and retaliation." "Retaliation like humiliating me publicly to make sure I never challenge him," I said. "Exactly," she replied. We built a timeline: my graduation, the waiver, Uncle Steve's forced exit, the big city contract, the malfunctioning lights, the wedding speech. The line from family joke to weapon became painfully clear. 2 weeks into our deep dive, I got an email from the procurement integrity inbox I'd messaged after the wedding. It wasn't a form auto-response this time. It was from a real person, a compliance officer named Mark Dalton, asking if I'd be willing to speak confidentially about potential irregularities involving Carter Municipal Systems. I stared at the screen for a long time. This was it. The moment where my private, petty-seeming family humiliation collided with actual law. I forwarded the email to Lauren. She called within minutes. "If you talk to them, Mia, this stops being just a revenge fantasy," she said. "It becomes a whistleblower case. Are you ready for that? For subpoenas? For hearings? For your family knowing it was you?" I thought of my father raising his glass, the room erupting. I thought of my mother looking away instead of stepping in, of my sister laughing along so she didn't ruin her wedding vibe. "He decided to make me the villain in his story a long time ago," I said. "If I'm going to be the villain, I might as well be the one who tells the truth." I agreed to the meeting. We scheduled it for 3 weeks out to give Lauren time to prepare. In those 3 weeks, the energy in my parents' house, where I still technically rented the small attic apartment, shifted from chilly to paranoid. My father started locking his home office. My mother jumped every time the landline rang. Whispered conversations died the second I walked into the kitchen. They knew I was up to something. They didn't yet know what, but they were about to find out. If you discovered your family's money and your own erasure were built on lies and rigged paperwork, would you keep the peace, or would you risk blowing up everything to drag those secrets into the light? If there's one thing working in cybersecurity teaches you, it's how careless people are with their passwords. My father was no exception. Years ago, when I helped him set up his first smartphone, he insisted on using the same simple password he'd always used. I begged him to change it. He refused. "No one's interested in some old man's emails," he'd scoffed. He wasn't my client, so I let it go. Now, sitting in my attic with the glow of my laptop on my face and the wedding recording in my headphones, I opened a private browser window and typed in the webmail address for Carter Municipal Systems. I hesitated. Lauren's warning about staying by the book echoed in my head. But then I remembered the waiver I'd signed at 22, the way he'd weaponized my trust. He'd never followed rules when it came to controlling me. Why was I still playing nice? I entered his corporate address and the old lazy password. The inbox loaded. Hundreds of messages, contract negotiations, forwarded jokes, a few all-staff memos where he congratulated my brilliant daughter Hannah on a presentation. Nothing about his mistake of a daughter, of course. I didn't snoop for the fun of it. I set up a simple, silent rule. Any email he sent or received with certain keywords, audit, inspection, change order, my name, would automatically forward to a new encrypted account I'd created under a random alias. Then I logged out. If he ever got breached, there would be no obvious trace back to me. Within days, the forwarded emails began to trickle in. A thread with a city engineer pushing back on signing off early. My father replying, "We've taken care of your supervisor, don't worry about it." An exchange with a banker about moving that last chunk into HC's trust before year-end. HC could only be Hannah. And then, one Thursday, an email popped up with a subject line that made my skin crawl. "Family dinner, Saturday." It wasn't sent to me directly. It was from my father to my mother and sister. "We need to bring Mia back in line before she does something stupid," he'd written. "Let's keep it calm. Make it seem like we want to hear her out. I'll have the paperwork ready." My mother replied, "Are you sure this will work?" My sister, "It's my first weekend back from the honeymoon, Dad. Can we not make this a war?" My father, "It's already a war. She just doesn't know the rules. Saturday, 7 p.m. That restaurant she likes? She'll come if you invite her." I didn't know what paperwork he meant, but I knew I wasn't walking into an ambush unprepared. When my mother knocked on my attic door that night and asked, in her careful, brittle voice, if I'd like to have a nice family dinner to clear the air, I smiled. "Sure," I said. "I'd love that." On Saturday, I arrived at the restaurant 10 minutes early with a small USB drive in my purse and a printed transcript of the wedding speech folded in half. The hostess led me to a private room in the back. My parents and my sister were already seated. 3 sets of eyes turned toward me with varying shades of guilt, annoyance, and fear. "Mia," my father said, standing up just enough to look like he had manners. "You look presentable. You look exactly like a man who shouldn't reuse passwords," I thought, but I just took my seat. After a few minutes of fake small talk, he got to the point. He slid a manila envelope across the table. "I asked you here because I'm worried about you," he said, using his concerned father voice. "You've been emotional since the wedding, saying some things to extended family that could hurt our reputation. I'd like us all to move forward." Inside the envelope was a non-disclosure agreement, a very aggressive one. It basically said I would never, under any circumstances, speak negatively about him, his company, or internal family business, on pain of being sued for everything I owned. In exchange, he was offering me a check for an insulting amount and a temporary reduction in rent for the attic. He wanted to buy my silence cheap. "So let me get this straight," I said calmly. "You humiliate me in public, call me a mistake into a microphone, and your solution is that I sign a legal document promising never to talk about it?" He shifted in his seat. "It was a joke," he said. "People knew I didn't mean it. You're making a big deal out of nothing." "Really?" I pulled the folded transcript from my purse and slid it across the table. "Because this is word for word what you said. My phone recorded it. So did the videographer. I've backed it up 6 different ways, and I've already shared it with an attorney and a state procurement officer, who both think it shows a pattern of psychological abuse and retaliation." My mother sucked in a breath. My sister stared at me like she'd never seen me before. My father's face went from pink to a deep, dangerous red. "You what?" he asked. I didn't flinch. "You've been moving assets into Hannah's name, cutting out your brother, strong-arming city officials, and using my existence as a punchline," I said. "You made 3 mistakes, Dad. The first was underestimating how much I pay attention. The second was assuming I'd never fight back. And the third," I pulled the small USB drive from my purse and placed it on the table, "was leaving a trail." He didn't touch it. "What's on that?" he asked tightly. "Enough," I said. "Enough emails, enough contracts, enough side agreements, enough to make some very serious people very interested in how Carter Municipal Systems does business." The room went silent except for the noise of the restaurant outside. Finally, my sister spoke, voice thin. "You're going to destroy us," she whispered. "You're going to destroy everything he built." I looked at her. "He already destroyed me," I said. "I'm just done pretending I deserve it." I stood up, leaving the NDA untouched. "You invited me here to bring me back in line," I said. "Consider this my official notice that I've stepped off the line entirely." As I walked out of the restaurant, my father's voice followed me. "Mia, don't you dare do anything you can't undo." I didn't look back. "You should have thought of that before you grabbed the microphone," I called over my shoulder. "If your family sat you down, smiled, and slid an NDA across the table to silence you, would you sign for the sake of peace, or would you walk away and let them be afraid of what you might do next?" The fallout from the family dinner came fast. My father stopped speaking to me entirely. My mother's texts turned into clipped, neutral messages about mail and utilities, but it was my sister, Hannah Carter, who surprised me. 2 days after the dinner, she called. "Can we talk?" she asked, her voice small. We met, not at a cafe like in some cliché movie, but at the climbing gym where I usually went to get out of my own head. On weekdays, it was mostly empty. We sat on the crash mats under a wall of brightly colored holds, while a pop playlist hummed in the background. Hannah looked out of place in her designer leggings and pristine sneakers. "You picked an interesting battleground," she said, glancing up at the wall. "You picked a convenient time to remember I exist," I replied. She winced. "Okay, I deserve that." For a moment, we just sat there. Two women who shared DNA and almost nothing else. Hannah was everything my parents bragged about. Polished, agreeable, the perfect marketing director for my father's company. I was the one who broke things for a living and told people where their security sucked. "I didn't know he was going to say that at the wedding," she blurted. "I wouldn't have let him." "You laughed," I said. "You looked right at me and laughed." She flushed. "I panicked, okay? Everyone was staring at me. It was my wedding night and he was drunk and I thought if I made it seem like a joke, maybe it wouldn't be so awful." "How did that work out?" I asked. "Does it feel less awful now?" She swallowed hard. "No." A beat. "But Mia, going to lawyers? Talking to state offices? You're taking this too far." I pulled a printout from my bag, not of my father's speech this time, but of the shareholder registry I'd found. I tapped the line with her initials. "He gave you a quarter of the company," I said. "Meanwhile, he tricked me into signing away my rights by calling it standard paperwork." "You want to talk about too far?" She stared at the paper, her face draining of color. "I didn't know about this," she whispered. "He told me you weren't interested in the business, that you said you didn't want anything from him." "I said I didn't want to be his employee," I corrected. "I never said I didn't want a father." She looked up at me, eyes shining. "He paid for my wedding," she said. "He paid for grad school. When I didn't get that first promotion, he created a position for me. I thought he was just being supportive." "He was buying your loyalty," I said gently, "and punishing me for not being buyable." She hugged her arms around herself. "So what now?" she asked. "You burn everything down and call it justice?" "I don't want you homeless, Hannah," I said. "I don't want you punished for things you didn't know. But I am done letting him get away with hurting people and hiding behind family. The city deserves to know if his systems are unsafe. His employees deserve to know why your uncle disappeared. And I deserve not to be called a mistake by the man who created me." "He's still our dad," she said, desperate. "He's the only one we've got." "No," I said quietly. "He's the only father we share by blood. That's not the same thing." We sat in silence for a while, listening to someone fall off a route and land on the mat with a soft thud. Finally, Hannah spoke again. "If you go through with this," she said, "he'll come for you. Legally, emotionally, whatever he can. He'll say you're unstable. He'll tell everyone this is because you're jealous of me." "He's been saying that my whole life," I said. "The difference is, this time I have receipts." She nodded slowly, then stood. "I can't help you," she said. "Not openly. I owe him too much. He can ruin my career." She hesitated. "But Mom's been hiding things too. Bank statements, letters from the city. She keeps them in a locked drawer in her office at the district building. If you want to know how deep this goes, that's where I'd look." I stared at her. "Why are you telling me this if you're not on my side?" She gave a sad little smile. "I didn't say I wasn't on your side," she said. "I said I can't look like I am." As she walked away, I realized the golden child wasn't as blind as I'd thought, just more entangled. If your sibling told you they couldn't stand with you in public but quietly handed you the key to the next secret, would you hate them for their cowardice or see it as the only courage they can afford? My mother, Linda Carter, had spent her career in education. By the time all of this happened, she was an assistant superintendent for the school district, polished, diplomatic, and very good at pretending problems didn't exist if acknowledging them would rock the boat. Her office was on the third floor of a bland administrative building near downtown. I'd been there a few times to drop off forgotten lunches as a teenager. I'd never gone there to confront her as an adult. I called and asked if we could talk. "I'm busy," she said automatically, then sighed. "Come by at 4. We'll have a few minutes before my board prep." At 4 o'clock sharp, I walked past the receptionist, up the elevator, and down the hall lined with student artwork and motivational posters. My mother's door was half closed. I knocked and stepped inside. She looked smaller behind the big desk than she did at home. Her professional mask slipped just a little when she saw me. "Mia," she said, "this isn't a good time. There's never a good time to admit your husband might be a criminal," I said, closing the door behind me. "We should start anyway." Her eyes flashed. "Watch your tone," she snapped. Then, more quietly, "What do you want?" I sat down without being invited. "I talked to Hannah," I said. "She told me you keep financial documents in a locked drawer, statements, letters from the city, things you don't want Dad to know you still have." My mother's hand twitched toward the drawer so fast it was almost funny. "She had no right." "You had no right to stand there at that wedding and let him call me a mistake," I cut in. "You had no right to help him hide money and push people out and pretend you didn't know, because it kept the house nice and the vacations paid for." She slumped back, the fight draining out of her shoulders. For the first time, she looked tired, old. "You don't understand the position I'm in," she said. "He controls everything, the house, the retirement accounts, your tuition, Hannah's. If I push too hard, he threatens to cut us off, to leave and take it all. Do you know what it's like to build your whole life around someone who can ruin you with one signature? Do you know what it's like to grow up in that house?" I shot back. "To learn that love is conditional and humiliation is just joking, to watch you look away every time he went too far?" Silence hung between us for a long moment. Then my mother whispered, "Open the drawer." I paused. "What?" "Open it," she repeated, voice flat. "If you're going to tear this apart, you might as well see the whole mess." I walked around the desk. She unlocked the drawer with a small silver key and slid it open. Inside were neatly labeled folders: House Refi 2018, College Funds, Carter Municipal, Miss C. I pulled out the last one. Inside were copies of letters from the city procurement office, raising serious questions about billing discrepancies. A warning notice about potential suspension from future contracts if issues weren't resolved. A handwritten note in my father's unmistakable scrawl: "Don't worry, I'll handle this." Underneath those, bank statements showing large transfers from business accounts into a trust with my sister's name on it, and withdrawals from what was supposed to be a college fund in my name. Dates matched major family emergencies I vaguely remembered: sudden trips, mysterious cash-only repairs. "He pulled money from my education to plug holes in his fraud," I said numbly. "You co-signed these?" My mother's signature sat next to my father's on several documents. "He said we'd put it back," she whispered. "He said it was temporary. And you got your scholarship for cybersecurity, so I thought." Her voice trailed off. "It was easier not to think at all." I flipped to the back of the folder and froze. There, stapled to a letter from the city, was a copy of my own waiver, the one I'd signed at graduation. The attached note from my father to my mother read, "Once this is signed, she's off the table legally. Focus on H's stake. She's the future." My mother looked like she might be sick. "I didn't see that note before," she whispered. "He didn't show me everything." "But you saw enough," I said softly. "Enough to know you were choosing him over me." Tears filled her eyes, but she wiped them away angrily. "Do you think I had real choices, Mia?" she asked. "I married him at 22. I didn't finish my degree until you were in middle school. He controlled the money, the mortgage, the retirements. If I left, where was I supposed to go? How was I supposed to take care of you? You were supposed to stop him from tearing me down every time he got bored," I said. "You were supposed to draw a line somewhere. Even if you couldn't leave, you could have said, 'Not my child.'" Instead, you locked the evidence in a drawer and prayed it would disappear. She sagged. What are you going to do with this? She asked, nodding at the file in my hands. I already have a meeting with the state compliance officer, I said. And Lauren thinks there's a strong whistleblower case. This folder just made it stronger. My mother stared at the window behind me, eyes unfocused. He will lose everything, she said. The contracts, the company, maybe even his freedom. He should have thought of that before he decided laws were for other people, I replied. And before he decided his daughter was disposable. She swallowed. If I give you my own statement, she said slowly. If I admit what I've seen, maybe it will show I'm cooperating. Maybe they'll go easier on me. Maybe, I said. I can't promise anything, but it will show the truth. That he didn't just make mistakes. He made choices. Over and over. For the first time, my mother looked directly at me, really looking, as if she were seeing the adult I'd become instead of the child she'd failed. I am so sorry, Mia, she said, voice breaking. Sorry isn't a time machine, I replied. But if you mean it, you'll back it up in writing. That night, in my attic, I added my mother's documents to the growing digital case file and typed up a summary of what she'd told me. Every keystroke felt like hammering another nail into the coffin of the life we'd pretended was normal. If you discovered your parent had looked away from your pain for years because it was easier than losing their lifestyle, and now they wanted your help to save themselves, would you shut the drawer and walk out? Or would you use what they handed you to finally force the truth into the open? 2 months after my father stood up at my sister's wedding and called me a mistake, my phone wouldn't stop vibrating on my desk. It was a Tuesday. I was in the middle of a hospital phishing awareness training when my bag started sliding across the floor from the constant buzzing. During the break, I checked the screen. Dozens of missed calls from Mom, Dad, Hannah, and relatives I barely spoke to. Our family group chat was on fire. Messages flew past. What did you do to us? They're freezing the accounts. Call your father now. A news alert popped up. City suspends contracts with Carter Municipal Systems pending fraud investigation. There was a photo of my father in a suit, jaw tight, heading into the state attorney general's office. The quiet whistleblower meeting I'd had weeks earlier, with Lauren at my side and Mark Dalton across the table, was now a full-blown storm. I'd given them everything. The emails, contracts, billing patterns, safety letters, bank statements, my uncle's documents, my mother's files, the waiver, and the wedding recording. They hadn't promised outcomes. They'd simply said, "We'll investigate." Clearly,